Most of you have already seen at least one presentation on this. I'm going to keep it very brief. And yeah. So Timing Framework is designed to be a user-friendly Visual Studio add-in for benchmarking small segments of C++ code. It utilizes Intel performance counters. So it's all done in hardware on processors, so there's no overhead in terms of while your code is executing. It basically takes a reading before and after the small segment of code runs, and then can analyze various parameters about it, such as like CPU cycles taken, cache misses, in total over 60 different parameters. And recent modifications since the last time I presented have increased the benchmark speed by an order of magnitude. So now you don't have to wait 12 seconds minimum for your 3 lines of code to benchmark. It's basically the time it would take for Visual Studio to compile that small section of code by itself, which is generally a second or 2. I also have implemented proper error handling for if you try to benchmark like while true loop. It no longer gives you a blue screen of death. It's generally an improvement. And if you run something that takes, let's say, 10 minutes to run, like a loop that just is insanely long, it will now properly handle that and warn you after a certain cutoff time that your code is taking a long time to run, and will ask you if it wants to continue while suspending it when it pops up that warning so that it can continue it without incurring any overhead. So as of last time, what was supposed to be implemented was a color-coded thing where it could basically benchmark a program and list a sort of heat map of which lines of code take the longest to run. In practice, that was not too practical because most lines of code can't run by themselves and would require a significant amount of overhead to independently time lines of code, where every line of code would need its own permutation of the executable, which would result in, for a 100-line program, building the program 100 times in order to benchmark it. So other than that, progress has been mainly debugging it. It is now stable enough to be used by an end user. However, the user interface is not quite finished. It needs an icon and more polished graphics and a help file. However, as soon as that's done, it will be available in the Visual Studio gallery of add-ins, where end users will be able to download this. It will integrate flawlessly into Visual Studio. And I'll obtain feedback, fix bugs, repeat. Yeah. So thanks to everyone who makes Arcos possible, and all members of Arcos.
Do you ever debug performance issues with the timing framework?
I actually, it's interesting you guys that. A lot of timing frameworks written in Visual Basic, as well as assembly and C++. And when you run the timing framework, it actually generates C++ code, which it then builds and links against assembly code while you're executing it. So I've debugged the C++ parts of, that's how I got the order of magnitude increase in speed, actually. I found out I was hanging with some resource pipelining issues, basically. So in my assembly code, I made some stupid, so that got fixed. But yeah, this can also actually do assembly, but it's not as user-friendly for that, so that's not currently a feature, although it will be in the future.
x86 assembly? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.